Hello, this is Ruth Hollingshead, trustee for Sight for Wight, welcoming you to this week's Talking News.
Sight for Wight Talking News for Friday the 9th of October 2020.
Alison, reading from the Isle of Wight County Press. Amateur boxer who thought he was above the law sentenced. A Ryde man described as a violent amateur boxer who thought he was above the law has been fined after smashing his former partner's phone. Thomas Chessel, 33, of West Hill Road, pleaded guilty to criminal damage at the Isle of Wight Magistrates Court on Tuesday. The court heard from prosecutor Liz Miller how on July the 2nd Chessel had smashed his ex-partner's phone while she was in the company of her new boyfriend. Ms. Miller said in the impact statement the victim spoke of how scared she was for herself and her child. The victim described Chessel as a violent amateur boxer who was constantly starting on her boyfriend and friends. She said she had reported his violent behaviour in the past and he had thought he was above the law because he knew a few police officers. Keith Verinder for Chessel said his client had been in a relationship with the woman in question more than a year and a half before. He said the pair had bumped into each other in the street, and when the victim had taken her phone out to start recording the conversation, Chessel knocked it out of her hand, the screen smashing on the ground. Mr. Verinder said Chessel, a carpenter, had expressed how sorry he was for what he had done. Chessel was fined £375 for criminal damage and was ordered to pay £100 compensation, costs of £85 and a £38 surcharge.
This is Brian reading an article from the Isle of Wight County Press. English Heritage Osbornes portrait of Queen Victoria's goddaughter. A new painting of Sarah Forbes Burnetta, the daughter of an African ruler who became Queen Victoria's goddaughter, was unveiled at Osborne on Wednesday. The painting by artist Hannah Uza is on display at the English Heritage property on the Isle of Wight throughout October for the duration of Black History Month. It is based on a photograph in the National Portrait Gallery in London and shows Sarah in her wedding dress. Hannah Uza said, "Through my art, I'm interested in exploring those forgotten black people in British history, people such as Sarah. What I find interesting about Sarah is that she challenges our assumptions about the status of black women in Victorian Britain." Hannah said, "I was also drawn to her because of the parallels with my own family and my children who share Sarah's Nigerian heritage. To see Sarah return to Osborne, her godmother's home, is very satisfying, and I hope my portrait will mean more people discover her story. The painting will return to the house in East Cowes permanently from next spring as part of a wider series of portraits." The daughter of a West African ruler, Sarah, who was originally named Aina, was orphaned and sold into slavery at the age of 5. In 1850, she was presented as a diplomatic gift to Captain Frederick Forbes of the HMS Burnetta and was brought to England. Aged 7, she was introduced to Queen Victoria, who described her as sharp and intelligent. The Queen met Sarah several times over the next 2 years, including at Osborne. She was so taken with the young child that she paid for her education and became her godmother. In 1862, Sarah married a Brighton-based Sierra Leone-born merchant called James Davies, the son of liberated slaves. The couple named her first daughter after the Queen, who also became the child's godmother. Anna Evis, English Heritage Curatorial Director, said, There are a number of black figures from the past who have played significant roles at some of our historic sites in our care, but their stories are not very well known. Starting with Sarah, our portraits project is one way we're bringing these stories to life and sharing them with our visitors.
This is Chris reading an article from the Island Echo. Newport town taking part in Fiver Fest fun this October. Thousands of independent businesses are coming together to highlight their contribution to the great British high streets. Newport is taking part along with 100 independent high streets across the UK in a totally local Fiver Fest. Joe Randall from Newport Business Association said, "Fiver Fest is now a big part of our promotions for Newport. The independent shops and businesses are what makes our town special and unique. The island's Let's Buy Local campaign is also highlighting the importance of keeping our island pounds circulating locally. We appreciate it when our community support us, so these offers are to say thank you for that support and to show just what great value our local businesses are." Fiverfest is a free-to-join campaign devised and run by Totally Locally, a grassroots high street organisation that has been helping businesses and high streets to help themselves since 2010, with incredible results. This Fiverfest, Totally Locally, is partnering with Visa to encourage even more small business owners to sign up to this celebration of independent high streets. Together, they are also calling on consumers to divert £5 of their weekly spend to support the small businesses in their communities. Fiverfest is based around the now famous Totally Locally £5 message. If every adult in Newport spent just £5 per week in their local independent shops and businesses, it would mean many millions per year going directly into our local economy, which can lead to more jobs, a better high street, a stronger economy, and a nicer place to live. It makes you think, doesn't it? Spending just £5 a week in Newport makes a big difference to our high street. The Fiverfest promotes this message. Fiverfest has been running successfully in individual towns in the UK and abroad over the past 7 years. But in 2019, the team at Totally Locally brought together towns across the country on Big Fiverfest celebration. 43 towns joined in, and the result was phenomenal, with reports of new customers, people rediscovering shops they hadn't been into for years, and huge sales of £5 offers.
This is Howard reading an article from the Island Echo. The post office has announced that it will be closing its Wooden Bridge branch from the start of next month. Following the resignation of the operator and withdrawal of the premises for post office use, it's been announced that the Wooden Bridge post office on the High Street will close on Sunday 1st of November at 17:30. The branch is currently located at the Central Convenience Store near the Cedars Junction. The area now faces losing its post office altogether if an alternative suitable location can't be found. The post office says it's looking to restore a service in the area as soon as possible. After 1st of November and until new premises can be found, customers are being directed to use the York Avenue post office in East Cowes or Binstead post office on the outskirts of Ryde. The local parish council says it will be working to resolve the situation for the local community.
This is Den reading from the Isle of Wight County Press. Isle of Wight, all white shark caught on camera. A Hampshire man says catching a completely white shark off the Isle of Wight was the fish of a lifetime, 1 in a million. Jason Gillespie made the catch while fishing above a wreck site off the island's coast last week. The taupe shark, which experts think has a pigmentation deficiency, which means it has lost its usual colouring, was released unharmed after some quick photographs. The 50-year-old shop fitter says no one has contacted him to say they have caught anything similar in English waters, making it pretty unique. According to the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust, we shouldn't be scared by this incredible catch. The organisation there says there has never been a recorded unprovoked taupe attack on a human. In 2018, the Isle of Wight was named the 4th best place in the country for shark spotting.
Ferries are our weak link, says Isle of Wight councillor responsible for transport. On the Wight, Iona. The comments from Councillor Ian Ward came up at the Solent Transport Joint Committee meeting. Ferries are our weak link. Nobody seems to be able to direct them. That's the view of the Isle of Wight Council's Cabinet Member for Transport. At a meeting of the Solent Transport Joint Committee, Councillor Ian Ward, as representative for the Isle of Wight Council, asked transport strategists Solent Transport to raise the issue of the island's ferries with the Department for Transport. While discussing a study on rail connectivity in the Solent area, which set out recommendations and a clear strategic case for improvements to the rail network in the south, but not on the island. Councillor Ward, Cabinet Member for Infrastructure and Transport, said links to and from the island were vital, but the ferries let them down. He said, "We don't go anywhere without transport links, and we have a significant investment coming into the island, which is really good news. However, we have one weak link between the island and the mainland, and that is the ferries. They seem to be a body unto themselves. Nobody seems to be able to oversee them, direct them, or do anything." Richard Pemberton, Principal Transport Planner at Solent Transport, said it is a clear extension for the London to Portsmouth line to come to Ryde, so would keep it in mind. Recently, trouble with Red Funnel has seen its website and online ticket services brought down by a malicious attack and unexpected disruption to its timetable when boats were pulled from service due to mechanical issues. Delays are common at certain times of the year as the numbers of passenger and visitors to the island increase. Connections via foot or by vehicle to the island are provided by 3 main private companies, Hover Travel, Red Funnel and Whitelink, who operate in the commercial market. Despite many calls from island residents for the government to step in to help regulate prices and services, only the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency regulate the ferries to ensure safety and regulations are stuck to. With the proposed rail improvements fixing problems in the transport links, Councillor Ward said he hoped people would use the services and the connection to the mainland. The Island Line is set to undergo an update at the start of the new year for 3 months as new cars will replace the existing ones. A new passing loop at Brading will also be built and platforms will be upgraded. Another major £10 million regeneration has also recently been announced for the Ryde Transport Hub as part of the Transformation Cities Fund, which will see investment in Ryde Pier. Further details on plans will be released in the near future. Both Red Funnel and Whitelink declined to comment.
This is an article from the Isle of Wight Radio, read by Terry. COVID marshals are to patrol the Isle of Wight streets. COVID marshals are to be introduced on the Isle of Wight as part of government plans to enforce coronavirus restrictions. The Isle of Wight Council has received £75,624 to roll out the scheme, which it hopes will have a similar impact to that of its beach ambassadors. It is not yet known how many people will assume the roles. Although it is unlikely marshals will have enforcement powers, the council says it will link up with the police to look at how to approach proposals. Speaking after the Isle of Wight Council's Local Outbreak Engagement Board, Council leader Dave Stewart said the marshals will be used to educate and advise. I know our strategy is we will look to empower those individuals to work with the community to educate and advise before we have to go further. Our lesson on the island is that if we can do that, then most people will do what we ask. If I reflect back to the beach ambassadors we had during the summer, and that worked extremely well, most people were actually complying and they just needed some guidance and support. The Isle of Wight's Director of Public Health, Simon Bryant, said the plans are still in their early stages. He said government only sent detailed guidance through at midnight on Thursday night. We have now been allocated the amount of money. It will be a really strong contingent of people to support our approach. We are learning from places like Leicester, who have slightly different approaches with different communities. The COVID marshals are expected to be rolled out in the coming weeks.
Alison, reading from the Isle of Wight County Press. Isle of Wight's Museum of Island History reopens. The Museum of Island History at Newport's historic Guildhall reopened on Thursday. The collection on display provides an introduction to the incredible history of the Isle of Wight. Visitors can view some of the island's latest archaeological discoveries, find out about Garibaldi's connection to the island, and view the current temporary exhibition, A Tale of Two Shipwrecks. From Thursday, the museum will be open on Tuesdays and Thursdays between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. Admission is £1 per person. New measures at the museum. Visitors will be required to wear face coverings while in the museum and shop area. Numbers will be limited within the museum. Names and contact details of the lead member of your party will be collected for the purposes of NHS Track and Trace. A QR code will be on site so that visitors can record their visit on mobile devices. A one-way system is in place. Interactive exhibits have been removed and covered. For families, there is a free artefact activity pack to take home.
This is Chris, reading an article from the Isle of Wight County Press. Chain of good luck reunites man with wedding ring lost on Ventnor Beach. A remarkable chain of events helped reunite a man with his wedding ring after he lost it on Ventnor Beach. BBC Head of Internal News, Matt Eastley, lost his ring when a big wave hit him whilst he was holidaying on the island. He said, "I was playing a kind of beached whale act, rolling around in the surf in a fashion most unbecoming of a man of my vintage. In truth, I was not able to get up as the waves were so strong, but I wasn't letting on. I was kind of sitting in the surf with my hands in the sand. I realised that my wedding ring was missing. We'd been married for 15 years and I don't think in that time I've ever removed it. The suction of the water and the sand must have removed it from my finger. As you can imagine, I was devastated." He said, "There followed a frantic search by all of us. We looked all along the shoreline, but it really was like looking for a needle in a haystack. The waves were as lively and strong as I'd ever seen them, and I had to accept that the ring had gone forever." He went to get a cup of tea from Tony's tea room on Ventnor Esplanade and shared his disappointment with business owner Tony Horsfield, who, on the off chance, took his contact details in case the ring turned up. Matt said, "I left it more in hope than expectation, thinking it would be a miracle if it ever turned up, and such a tiny piece of jewellery would already have been washed far away." At the end of the holiday, we returned home to Kent, and I started making plans to replace the ring, but it didn't feel right. A couple of weeks later, we received a phone call out of the blue from Tony, who said there was a chance my ring had been found. In an incredible sequence of events, an 11-year-old girl from Southampton, Priya Sahu, had found the ring the following day. The family had travelled to Ventnor specifically to try seafront restaurant The Smoking Lobster. Back home, the family took the ring to a neighbour, who is good on social media, with the idea of starting some sort of campaign to find the ring's owner. By astonishing coincidence, the neighbour had a friend on the Isle of Wight, Tony from the tea rooms. After an exchange of emails and photographs to determine the ring was definitely Matt's, the families decided to meet in Southampton to return the ring to Matt's wedding finger. Priya's mum, Asweeta, said it was incredible. When Matt described the spot on Ventnor Beach where he had lost the ring, it was almost exactly where Priya found it. It felt like a miracle to see it back on Matt's finger.
This is Howard reading an article from the Isle of Wight County Press. A long-standing Isle of Wight coach company on Wednesday announced it will cease trading with immediate effect. Isle of Wight Tours has been established for more than 30 years, taking people from the island to areas of the UK such as Jersey and the Channel Islands and further afield to Ireland and Europe. Managing Director Shirley Wynne had earlier engaged in Zoom meetings with cabinet politicians in a bid to gain assistance for the UK coach industry and keep companies such as hers afloat. Along with the Confederation of Passenger Transport, CPT, she held meetings with the Chancellor Rishi Sunak, Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab, and Secretary of State for Transport Grant Shapps. A statement from Isle of Wight Tours said, "We're sorry to announce that Isle of Wight Tours Limited has ceased trading. We've tried so hard for you, our more than loyal customers, to keep our heads above water. We've worked hard to cancel, postpone, refund what is now nearly 30,000 customers, but with over 90% of our trade for the year wiped out by COVID-19, and with cancellations now coming for 2021, we're unable to continue. Please rest assured we've financially protected our customers' money. If you have booked a holiday by coach or an event-style break including overnight accommodation, you are entitled to a full refund of the monies paid for the holiday. We want to thank you for allowing us to have looked after you. Some of our customers have been loyal for all 31 years we've been trading. We've laughed together, cried together, and enjoyed each other's company over the years, and we're really going to miss each and every one of you." As recently as last month, Isle of Wight Tours was named Best Group Tour Operator for the second consecutive year at the 24th Annual Group Travel Awards.
Hello, this is Lisa, CEO of Sight for Wight, welcoming you to this week's Talking News. It's been a busy week as we've managed to get our October newsletter out to the members this week. The New Style newsletter is packed with information and stories from our members and volunteers and trustees. If you would like to contribute to next issue of the magazine, this will be published at the end of November to go out in December. We are always looking for volunteers and members to tell their story and give us other volunteers and members hints and tips. This week has also seen the launch of our annual story writing competition. Chris has worked hard to engage celebrities to be our readers for the winning stories, and although we will be unable to hold an actual award ceremony this year, we will be holding a virtual ceremony, which we will then be able to share with members and entrants to the competition alike. The next article on this Talking News is a recording of an interview that Ruth Hollingshead, trustee, and I attended at Hampshire Police Station with ACC Dibden when we were talking about the launch of the Visual Impairments Protocol by Hampshire, Isle of Wight and Thames Valley Police. This new protocol was brought about entirely by Tina Snow going to the BBC Radio Solent and reporting that she was unable to identify a police officer as genuine or not. Tina has worked tirelessly over the last few months with Hampshire Police in order to bring this protocol into action. We were then consulted to look at the practicalities and the information that would be offered around it, and we were delighted to help Tina and the police with this. The recording of the interview will now follow. Thank you for listening to this week's Talking News.
I'm Lisa, CEO of Sight for Wight. We have just over 1,000 severely sight impaired and sight impaired members on the Isle of Wight. Severely sight impaired is somebody who formerly was known as registered blind, and then sight impaired was somebody who was formerly known as partially sighted. They changed the jargon, which interestingly has upset some completely blind people to be now called severely sight impaired. They actually want to be called blind.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Because I'm severely sight impaired, but I have about 12% of vision, but I can see a huge amount more than Ruth can, who is also legally the same status as me.
Yes.
There is a huge number of things that can cause sight loss. So somebody like me, when I was brought up, I went through normal mainstream school. I've never read a blackboard, I can't read a book, but that was how it was in those days, and I'm very grateful to my parents for doing that, because I think it makes you quite a different person. But equally, I've become a very accomplished actress at pretending that I can see what's going on, and I can't. And that's why the schemes like the Hidden Disabilities is a really good way of just telling people there is something that's slightly different. So we have gone out and asked our members how they would feel if a police officer came to the door, and of course the resounding answer is they wouldn't be able to identify whether it was genuine. So first sort of question really is, how did this new visually impaired protocol come to fruition? What caused it to come to fruition?
Okay, so my name's Craig Dibden, and I'm an Assistant Chief Constable in Hampshire Police, and I am the force lead for disability. So we've got leads for various different protected characteristics, not all, but a disability is one we do, and I have the force lead role for that. That's how this came to be. That's how I came to be involved in this piece of work. As I said to you earlier on, I've seen your video, or watched the video this morning, so I've seen a lot of the people that were interviewed in relation specifically to what would happen if a police officer knocked on the door, and that was A, was interesting, and B, powerful. So that was really helpful as well for us to kind of contextualise the issue, and that was really good and really helpful. To answer your question, because I could stop there and be all politician-like, couldn't I? We hasn't answered my question. To answer your question, so the BBC were contacted by a lady from the Isle of Wight called Tina, and Tina had a reason to be involved with the police that caused her to raise the issue to us that when an officer knocked on her door, she, for all intents and purposes, in my words, not Tina's, essentially felt vulnerable because she was not able to ascertain the, if you like, the legality of the identification that was given to her, and we were approached by the BBC to say, this sounds like a bit of a gap, Hampshire Police, what are you doing about this, and is this true? So that came to me as the force disability lead amongst other people, and I picked it up, and as a result of that, we took it into the disability group, and Tamsin Drury, who is our force ICT accessibility advisor, has been working with me and effectively leading this work on. So what can we do to work with Tina? And one of the first things we did, which is really helpful, was ask Tina if she's willing to work with us on this, because we don't know. I don't know, do I? What you need, what sight impaired people need, what severely sight impaired people need, and it'd be wrong of me to then just come up with a solution that doesn't fit the request. So, and what we were lucky that Tina was willing to work with us. So she made contact with us. Tamsin had contact with Tina, and that's how we came to be starting to develop. Right, how do we improve this? Because the early foundation stone that I agreed with the rest of the disability group was, this position is not one that I'm willing to accept on behalf of Hampshire Police. So go away and come up with a solution, if we can, that solves this problem, because this isn't fair if we want to be inclusive for all our communities.
I think you've raised a very interesting point there, that it's very easy to put a blindfold on for 10 minutes and say, well, I can pretend to be blind now, so how would I feel? But putting a blindfold on for 10 minutes and living with the actual reality 24/7 is very, very, very different. And we actually, when we do training with people, we don't like putting blindfolds on for that reason, because then you think you understand how someone might feel. So that's very encouraging that the police did go back and ask Tina directly, and indeed engage with ourselves, Open Site and Southampton Site, I believe, as well.
Yeah.
Would you give us a brief description of how the service will actually work?
Yeah, so I'll keep it simple to start with, not because I think you need to have it kept simple, but because, and then you can, if you need more detail, then I'll expand. It's probably better to do it that way. So in essence, what will happen now is somebody who is sight impaired or severely sight impaired, if they need to contact the police, they will, if it's their first contact, they will tell our contact management team that they are severely sight impaired or sight impaired, and that our contact management team will then know to activate the visually impaired protocol. So do we need to change that to call the sight impaired protocol, by the way?
No, interestingly, you can be severely sight impaired and sight impaired, but as a group you're called visually impaired.
Okay, so we're still all right with that. So that's
because
good.
If you use sight impaired, it would confuse, do you mean registered sight impaired as opposed to registered severely sight impaired?
Okay, so we're all right with the title. We haven't got to change that already.
No SIPs, VIPs is fine.
Okay, that's good. So the contact management operator will know to activate the visually impaired protocol, and in essence what that means is the individual selects the password, and then the officers that arrive at the door will then, the individual will be given the password that they've given the control room, and they'll have the confidence that that is, the police officers are who they say they are. So that, in essence, that's how it works. And then when they, if they have cause to call the police again in the future, they can select a different password every time.
Lovely.
So that can change.
So obviously the key question is then going to be what happens in an emergency situation where there isn't the time or facility to start setting up passwords?
Well, I guess it will depend on what the emergency is. I mean, if it's a life-threatening scenario, then our primary purpose for being for being a police officer is to protect life. So, if the delaying of setting up a password and using a password would cause someone's life to be in danger or at risk, then we would not do that, and the officers would know not to do that. Having said that, officers will know that this process exists, and if the sight impaired individual is aware of the protocol, which they should be, they still need to declare the fact they're sight impaired, and they would like to use the protocol, but in the circumstances it may be that it's not possible to do that within the time frame. That then, the officers can then still be told that information, that the person you're going to be meeting or would like is sight impaired. We haven't had time to invoke the protocol. I would still expect our officers, and they will be trained accordingly, to understand that the individual they're going to be meeting with is sight impaired, and although they may not have the time because of the urgency of the situation to use the protocol, but they would still ask the right questions. They would still show some care and respect and understanding to the individual, and explain to them what they're doing, how they're doing it, talk them through it, and then and generally speaking, those incidents are going to be, I would like to think, very few and far between.
Lovely. And the other thing our members have talked about is the reassurance that this training will be across any police officer that they will come in contact with, particularly on the Isle of Wight, i.e. that the training will all go out at once after a certain date. They can assume that any officer would have had that training. Yes. So we're combining our launch with this with National Inclusion Week. So from the 29th of September, we will be running familiarisation training for this. Now, there is always a caveat to every scenario in policing. Someone somewhere will not be on duty that day, or be off sick, or miss it, or come back. So there's always a risk that somebody won't. But so beyond the training, the familiarisation we'll do from the 29th of September, we will also be doing some work with the senior officers, the head of each command, and in particular our contact management teams, because contact management will be the single point of
the consistent single point for an individual who's contacting the police. So if the individual officer who's arriving doesn't necessarily know or is not familiar because of whatever reason that it's hard to predict, the control room will know, and the control room can manage that situation with the officer, whilst we do all we can to make sure those officers that have missed the training are brought up to speed.
Following on from that, if the policeman doesn't know the password, the person then has the absolute right to shut the door and say, I don't believe you're a genuine police officer, with no repercussions back on them.
None whatsoever. In fact, our officers will be trained as part of the package to encourage that challenge and ask. So no one should ever feel in any way vulnerable in that situation, and if they do, they've got every right to shut the door, and they've got every right to challenge and ask the officers and tell the officers they feel that, and then their point of contact will be back into control room and go through the process again if it hasn't worked.
And then finally, people believe that it can take a while to call 101. It's not an instant service that you might be waiting several minutes, 20, 30 minutes even, to get an answer. And I understand that from the police perspective, they may then tell the person that they will come back in 20 minutes or come back in half an hour if it's, for example, just door-to-door inquiries. If that happens, it's quite an ask to ask a severely sight impaired person to remember that information, which could be a log number or a call sign.
Yeah.
So most people have a way of coping, which is either to record it or to get someone to write it down and then use a screen reader. So how could that work with the police standing at the door?
So whether it be a crime number, an incident number, a unit number, or an officer's name that the individual needs, then if the requirements of the individual, I would expect all of our officers to ask the individuals concerned, from whatever community they come from, what means of communication do they need us to use to make this successful for them. And if the answer is, can you dictate it into my phone? Can you dictate it into a machine? Can you email me because I've got a reader on email? Yeah. Then all of those options. There's no reason why any of our officers will not use that, or PCSOs for that matter, because there may well be PCSOs that are involved in a response to this. There is no reason that should not happen.
And just very specifically on that, is it acceptable to video call a police officer to record that information, or has it just got to be audio?
So I think that'll be a personal situation for an officer. I'd have no problem video calling me, and I suspect that Joe here would have no problem being video called, and there'll be lots of officers that aren't. Some officers might be more protective of their identity, and some officers might be protective of their identity for good reason, i.e. they've previously done covert work or they've done undercover work and they don't want their facial image associated with the police uniform, knowingly. So a bit like so I think there's a reason why that might be difficult, but again, our job is to serve the public, and if that's the best means of communication, but the officer really doesn't want it, then that should just be a discussion with the individual who requires it and explain why they don't want that. Can I do it by audio, please? And if there's a real problem with that, then again, there will be a way that we can overcome that.
Because most people will have a phone and they're very used to pressing the video record on the camera, but for example, they could then face the camera down to the floor and just pick the audio up.
Yes.
Because most phones will have a voice recorder on them, but they're usually a little bit more complicated. You have to go into an app, start the recording, etc. Whereas pressing record on the camera is a very easy thing that most people will be able to do.
Yeah. And there will be some officers that are nervous about being video recorded for all the reasons that you've probably read about or seen or heard about on television in recent weeks and months, and demonstrations, public encounters, and so on. And that then gets used against police officers. This is not that situation. This is a friendly, respectful situation in which the police service is providing a service to a member of the public. So in that environment, I would see most officers I would expect to be okay with being videoed, but there will be some that won't, and there may be good reason for that. And if that causes a problem, we'll just need to find our way through that, and there will be a solution to it, I have no doubt. What I would expect, though, is the officer works to find that solution and doesn't just leave the individual sort of stranded.
Well, I think, in conclusion, our members will be very pleased that this is moving forward, and we fully accept that not everybody is the same. So, for example, I've got 40% hearing loss as well, and a lot of people who do have sight loss do have dual sensory loss. we understand from Tamsin that this is an ongoing situation, that it's going to be developed on an ongoing basis.
Absolutely. So within the disability group, we've got many different elements of our disability group within the organisation. One of those, of course, is our police liaison officers for hearing impaired people, and they've been established. That's a very well established network of officers who can sign and communicate through BSL and so on and so forth. So, and this is an issue that we've discussed with them. And there was a conference last year for hearing impaired people. We held at our headquarters at Netley, and one or two of the attendees there raised the issue of, we're hearing impaired, but we're also visually impaired. And so we are clear there's crossover there. And what I can see the next steps of this will be, how do we make our visually impaired response in policing as good as our hearing impaired response currently is, because that really is first class. And we've been, sort of, if not the leading force on this nationally for the last 20 years, one of. So that's the direction of travel for me, is bringing our visually impaired response up to the level of professionalism and service to visually impaired people that are hearing impaired.
Excellent. I'm sure the members will be very pleased
They
to hear
will be,
that.
yes.
And one final question, which was a direct question off a member, is it allowed to touch a warrant card? It's a specific question.
Yeah, I saw that answer. Again, you're going to be pleased with this. So, that was mentioned on the video, I think.
Yes, I think it was a specific question.
Yeah, and I don't know where that's come from.
Well, I found the video really
in fact, I can tell you, it is. Sorry, Tamsin.
No,
so it is allowed. So yes, it's a myth, and
Right.
there are some forces that have braille on their warrant cards.
Yeah,
So you're going to have to touch the warrant card if you want to read that.
absolutely. I'm glad we
So
bust
it's
that
a
myth
myth.
then.
Yeah, 'cause
Sorry,
it's funny. I've got friends who are based in London, and they said, "Well, just read the Braille part of it." And they said, "Well, I didn't even know whether you had it." My daughter's a police officer, and I said to her, "Have you got Braille?" And she said, "No, I haven't got Braille on my warrant card." It's
So we explored that, didn't we? And the reason we haven't gone down that route is because you still don't know as a police officer that's holding that braille card.
Yeah, but also I don't read Braille, so it wouldn't be any good anyway.
Okay, well, another good reason. But there's an even better reason.
Yeah,
But
I mean, obviously Tina
doesn't
does.
deal with the risk.
No, Tina
Someone
does, and
drops
she'd
the
be.
warrant card. They appear at your door.
Yeah.
Have you got your warrant card, please? And you read it, and you braille read it, and forgive me. It
Yes,
says,
because you've lost the ability to compare the photo.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely.
It could be anybody.
I think
So
that
there's
is
a real
a
risk to
question
that.
that people have come up with time and time again. Why can't they be brailled? And as you say, it could be anybody's card.
It doesn't
You can't
eliminate the
compare
risk
picture.
of vulnerability that the individual would face.
This is the scaffolding news for week commencing the 9th of October 2020. Newport area. Santander 26 St James Pyle Street. The Masonic Lodge, Lugley Street. 10 High Street, 10A Lugley Street. Ventnor area. 56 South Street, 32 South Street, South View Grove Road, 95 High Street. Shanklin, 95 to 97 High Street, 9 Landguard Road. Sandown area, 20 High Street, Wight City Culver Parade, 3 Downs View Perone Way, 42A Fitzroy Street. Totland area, Western View the Broadway, Lilliput Court 6 Broadway. Ryde area, 116 118 High Street. 23 St John's Road, 168A High Street. Yarmouth area, Pharmacy Key Road. This is the Skip news for week commencing October the 9th, 2020. Cowes area, 72 High Street. Plot Shaw Road, Gurnard. Ventnor area, Waterside Cafe, 3 Esplanade. Yarmouth area, Loveshaw House, High Street. Bembridge area, 42 Forlands Road. Newport area. Lugley House, Lugley Street. Ryde area. 35 Dover Street, 51 Alfred Street, Beardsall's 2 High Street, 9 Mill Ward Road.
Sight for Wight would like to thank you for listening to this week's edition of the Talking News. We would also like to thank our volunteers for reading, and a particular thank you to the Isle of Wight County Press, Isle of Wight Radio, On the Wight and Island Echo. A special thank you must go to Vectis Radio, who has helped us get vital information to our members.